a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expounding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this incredibly cool episode, Mark Gober comes back to talk about his book, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos. Now, I want to go ahead and mention up top to the audio-only audience that we do have a creative expansion artist. Erica Robin joins us and does an incredibly cool piece as we have this amazing conversation about Mark's new book, what sparked his interest in cosmology, as well as dark matter and the fallacies in cosmology as well. All of it very important to the conversation, guys. Dismantling what is not. Definitely check the video version down in the link. Also check the link down there for the best way to support your favorite show and the afterthought. We talk radical humanity, we talk the sun and moon and how they actually possibly move, and then we speculate wildly on terra and biogeology, guys. It's a phenomenal afterthought, great way to support your favorite show, all linked down below. But for now, and without any further ado, let's get to this incredibly cool conversation with Mark Gober. Mark Gober, welcoming back to the show. I want to go ahead and direct the audio-only audience's attention down to the show description down there, because we have an incredibly cool artist by the name of Erica Robin joining us to beautify this amazing, cool conversation with Mark here. We're going to be talking about, of course, his book, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos, and probably a few more, guys. He's got a stack back here, so we have a lot we can pick from. But definitely want to make sure that we have this conversation with you, brother, because I personally am so proud of you for having this, and we're going to talk a lot about it selfishly here. I also just, again, want to make sure everybody knows that all the ways to find him, his previous episodes, I'm going to go ahead and say you're the most returned guest on the show. You've joined us for at least 4 main episodes on the show and at least 4 or 5 group conversations that we've had. So welcome, man, back, right? And so all the ways to find him, his additional episodes, his website, his book, and more will be located down below, along with our incredibly cool creative expansion artist, Erica Robin, making it look great straight out the gate. And thank you guys all for joining us. So, Mark, dude, good to see you, man. How you been, brother?
Great to see you, Brandon. Thank you for having me back on. Always enjoy talking to you.
Got to, dude. I mean, this is so phenomenal. We're going to talk about it, but how have you been before we get to your work? Like you, how's your soul? Things are crazy. The world is fucking getting weirder. I know you see this, but how are you, my friend?
The world's crazy. I feel like I'm on my own evolutionary journey. And I describe it like a stock price chart. If you look at the stock market over many decades, it's an upward trajectory, but it's not a straight line. It goes down and up and down and up, and that feels like my journey. But I feel like a lot of people have that too.
Yeah. And I think that the calling it ascension is sort of your gateway into doing it and doing the work. But once you get here, you do realize it's more of the roller coaster. And lately, I've been really feeling it's more of the expansion, because as we get higher and higher concepts of light, we really get to see more and more of the dark. You're expanding in all directions, even in the dark and the shitty ones. So, but it's all for a balanced perspective, and it makes for a really interesting ride.
Yeah, and I think we're all shown the things that we haven't maybe dealt with before, or the things that are harder for us that we don't want to look at. And it seems like in this era, we can't hide, and we're going to be forced to face those more difficult things. And maybe I've heard people speculate it's because we're entering a period where everyone is needed to be in tippy top shape. So if there's any lingering issues, that we've got to deal with them. So it feels like an advanced course. And I don't think I'm the only one saying that right now. We're all dealing with a lot.
It's been insane. Like the next level, hard, level, like really challenged, putting it all into play here. And we're all rising to the occasion, even hurt. Like we're gardening hungry. And somebody pointed out the other day, she was like, actually, we're gardening while fasting, which is more deliberate and more conscious. And I like that. We're sowing the seeds, we're seeing them grow, but still unable to, or haven't really reached that precipice of that turnover of the true harvest, right? Of all of these ideas and what some of these things could look like when played out, and some of the old go ahead and exchanged out for some common sense, right?
Yeah, and I think we're all being asked to have faith and trust and being comfortable in not knowing what exactly is going to happen or not knowing why we're going through a particular situation, and to say, okay, this is happening. I don't have the 30,000 foot view. I like to think about it like we are in a maze. Walking through a maze, we can only see what's immediately in front of us. But if we had a helicopter's view way up, we could see where the maze is leading us. And so it's to keep in mind that maybe we don't see it from our vantage point, but there's a broader purpose behind everything.
I love that you put it this way. I was on the phone the other day with Ryan Sprague, who's a dear friend of ours, and I was explaining sort of our mental, and we've all sort of been going through it. So a lot of us, have been here on the phone back and forth and just checking in with each other extra. How are you doing? Okay, I've got 8 minutes for you. I heard this guy talk about that it takes 8 minutes to really kind of sit with somebody and make them feel appreciated and seen. And so that's the code word between him and his friend, is when they're having a tough time, they go, hey, do you have 8 minutes? And that's sort of just a little, can you step out of a meeting? Everybody has 8 minutes, right? And so we were spending our 8 minutes together, and I drew this little man in a maze out. I had a whiteboard right next to me, and so I was like, dude, this is how it feels. And there's a big version of you that can see it all, that you've got to trust, but it's drowned out by all this nonsense. And the you in the maze, what it feels like when we hit stagnation or frustration, it's like we're running up against a wall and we're not paying attention to that. If we just relax, there's a turn right there, and it's part of the maze. Instead of going a straight line, we've got to kind of relax and know that there are going to be curves in these things. And that's what surrender is all about. And like you just said, it's not knowing, you're doing it blind, man, right? Feeling your way through this thing, but we're doing it.
And a big part of the surrender is also acting. Meaning, like, some people hear the word surrender and they say, okay, I'm just going to sit on my couch all day and not make any decisions and not do anything. But part of the surrender is making decisions, even though it might be a difficult decision at the time, but it feels like the right thing to do. And even if the outcome of that is not clear. So it puts us in a very challenging situation, because sometimes you do need to sit back with surrender, but then other times it's about acting and then surrendering the outcome.
And that's discernment. And if you feel like you don't have anything to do and you feel very stagnant, there's always an action you can do that will relieve that. That is, help somebody else. There's no resistance or very little in helping somebody else or doing something nice for someone else, right? And that will really free up all that stagnation, kind of break you free and keep you moving. It's fascinating. Yeah. I love that we just get in here and just talk about anything, Mark. What is it? In fact, let's just touch on what you've really been talking about lately, because it's been topically relevant. And your End to Upside Down Liberty, which is one of the books back here in this amazingly beautiful stack that I'm grateful to have, talks all about that. So you've been, that subject. When did you write that book, first of all, for the audience's reference? An
End to Upside Down Liberty was published in 2021. And then An End to the Upside Down Reset was end of 2022, early 2023, depending on the edition. And those are my two most political books. And because of everything happening in the world, we're recording this in early 2025. There's a lot happening politically, and people have opinions all over the place. So I'm being asked to comment on that, which has been fascinating, because there's been a tide shift in how people are looking at politics, and a lot of questions are being asked today that were not happening in 2020, for example. So that's been fun to talk about. But I will say that those two books, the Liberty and Reset books, are somewhat distinct. So the Reset book talks about, I want to be careful with my buzzwords here because I know you're on YouTube, but let's just say the World Economic Forum's plan for society that's been laid out explicitly. And that gets into not just politics, but I also talk about leftism in that book versus liberalism, and the ways in which compassion can be weaponized. So there's a very big critique of that far left mentality. And whereas the Liberty book is really a critique of government itself. And you could have people like, for example, I'm doing a lot of conservative interviews, which is great because there's a lot of alignment. But ultimately, many conservatives still favor government in some way. They just want government to do the things they want to do, that they happen to agree with, which is the same as what happens on the left. The Liberty book gets into voluntarism, which I'm sure your audience is familiar with, sometimes called anarchism or anarcho-capitalism. It's not a society without rules. It is a society with rules. It's a society without rulers. So it's about privatizing everything, getting people out of the structure where they are beholden to people that they didn't necessarily agree to be beholden to. That's the way it works. Democracy, in the way that we do it, is actually tyranny. It's some people getting to impose their will on others. It just happens to be the will that maybe they like. So it's going to be fascinating to see whether that tide shifts, because we are in this left-right paradigm and there are reasons to critique both sides, I feel. But can people move into the understanding of, well, maybe government itself is the problem? And I'm hoping that a lot of this political turmoil will lead people down that true liberty path. But as of now, a lot of the discussions are about the Great Reset, and the, let's say, people in the center or maybe slightly left of center are starting to wake up and shift their views, which I think is good because they're seeing through a lot of the propaganda. But the next step is going to be going full on liberty.
Speaking of that, have you looked at the sovereignty movement at all? People getting their national getting out of being a citizenship, getting their national status?
Yes, I've looked into it. I'm not an expert on it. I know some people have gone super deep. My view on it is that I want to see how it plays out in practice when people actually go through it and whether or not it's actually safe to do. Because from my naive perspective, if you make a few little mistakes, you could be in some big trouble, depending on what you're doing in terms of getting out of taxes and stuff like that. So I'm sitting on the outside of it. I also don't have super intense knowledge of how it all works, but I think it's very important for people to be exploring it because it speaks to a broader system of enslavement, if you want to call it that somehow we've been subjected to just by virtue of our birth. We're brought into this system. So I'm glad that you and others have been looking into it for sure, and I support the exploration fully.
Yep, I'm a U.S. National non-citizen. I've already done the status change, did my revocation of election. I've made a lot of steps, man. E-Verify through the platform online, the .gov, a lot of steps. We could sit here for a minute and talk about it. But what I'd like to say about it is anybody screaming sovereign citizen, run away from those people. Those are non sequiturs, or those two words don't jive together, right? One means a free governor of self. The other is a member of a corporation, we'll say it nicely. And so there's a lot of confusing messaging. There's a lot of people who can bring you in. And we've got a wonderful community, Mark, and it's linked down below, guys. If you guys would like to join us for that, we meet for a trust community, and we're learning how to write trusts and get out of the banking system, as it were, and PMAs and all sorts of very interesting things. So if you guys are looking for empowerment, check the link down there. It's a wonderful way to move forward with this with some actionability, which is what it's all about, right? Because you could sit here and say the world's burning down around you, but like keep it on in the background, don't make it your main focus. There are actionable things, again, like researching this, like getting clear on what your rights are, because you're not owed them if you don't know what they are. They can be absolutely just scribbled off of a piece of paper from you, but that's part of this. And really, I see this more as a movement to get yourself out of the soul trap here, if that is the case. Because this is sort of that, it's very spiritual for me, Mark, man. I went really far away from spiritual, like, fuck all that, I hate it. And then now I'm like, man, this may lead me to Jesus. I don't know, because it's really interesting. It's that deep. It's really cool. So, wanted to also make sure that we get in here your latest book, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos. And again, guys, it's going to be linked down below. Highly recommend this book, man. And I just want to say how proud I am for you for writing it and doing it so well. Because, man, this can get opinionated, it can get heated, it can get emotional, and you did none of those things. You stuck to the facts. You really broke down all of the stuff in here. And then, of course, at the end, you always do really kind of take us on an arc through your research here. Because at the end, you really do slip us into consciousness. You're like the Zodiac wheel, right? By the time we get to the 12th house, it's into freaky woo-woo and consciousness and some pretty freaky shit. And it's awesome. But again, all well appropriated, and the foundation you lay up top is necessary for it. So first and foremost, what put this on your radar, dude? And more importantly, I want to know what that switch was like for you to go, oh, shit, I might be a flat earther. How was that?
Yeah, well, to be clear, if your audience isn't familiar with this book, I get into questioning all of cosmology. So where do we live? Was there a Big Bang in the way that we've been told? Does Earth move in the way we've been told? Does Earth revolve around the sun, or is Earth at the center? What is Earth's shape? All that. So I dive into some territory that we all know is super controversial. I had been hearing people discuss this for years, and I can't remember the first interview I heard. It might have been you interviewing Dave Weiss, but I don't remember because that was years ago. Yeah, and I hear lots of different things, like many of us. We take a lot of information in, and sometimes we put things on the back burner. And it's like, okay, there's some interesting stuff here, but I can't, in order to validate what's being said, I would need to spend a lot of time, and I'm focused on other things. So I've been writing many other books on other topics. But what I found is my sixth book, An End to Upside Down Medicine, which challenges the germ theory of disease and a lot of very controversial topics, especially given everything that started in 2020. I found that a lot of people that I really respected in that realm were saying, Mark, well, if you see what we're talking about with the logical fallacies in the way that medicine's conducted and the causes of disease and the problems in medicine, you got to look at cosmology because it's the same thing. So I'm saying, wait a second, these are people they're so smart, and they're saying you need to question cosmology because it's the same errors. And then a switch went off where I said I need to look into this. But let's say the most immediate recent switch was a book by Stephen A. Young. He's a theoretical physics PhD. He wrote a book called A Fool's Wisdom, which came out in April of 2024. And everyone was posting about it. And a lot of people I respected said, you got to check out this book. So of course I got it. And what he says in the book, among many other things, so the second half of the book is about alchemy, but he talks about social engineering in many different ways, challenging the nature of the atom, very fundamental stuff. But he said something in there when he talked about cosmology. As a theoretical physics PhD, this guy is classically trained and has been through everything. He said, I'm not 100% sure what this place is, but I'm 100% sure that it's not a spinning globe. I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost exactly that is what he says. And then he goes through his reasoning. And I'm like, okay, how can this be? And he explained his journey of hearing the challenges to mainstream cosmology and saying, well, I've got a PhD, I can shoot this down. And he spent years and he couldn't do it. And he laid out very simply what the arguments were. And then that led me to look at more and more things. And I realized this is a fundamental topic because previously I was asking the questions, which we've talked about a lot. Who are we and why are we here? I still ask those questions. But what I was not asking previously was what does here mean? What is here? Where are we? We're like on something. We live somewhere and we can see lights in the sky. But what is this place? Because we have such a deeply ingrained cosmology of massive space, so massive that 13.8 billion years ago, there was this big bang, and we've been in an expanding universe, and Earth is expanding over 1 million miles an hour because it's such a big place that we're in, and there's massive galaxies and these huge gas giants everywhere, and things are flying around. And that's a worldview. And then, of course, Earth is a ball, basically not exactly spherically shaped. Some would call it an oblate spheroid, but basically a ball floating in space and moving around in all these ways. And that's what here is. That's where we are, in which we're exploring spirituality and everything else. But in this book, what I realized in my research is that there are reasons to question everything I just said about that cosmology, which then leads to the question that I get into at the end of the book of, well, how does this relate to consciousness and the spiritual war that I've been writing about elsewhere and the deception of this place? Because if we've been basically lied to or kept in ignorance as to where we live, that's going to be very disorienting for us. And we're not going to necessarily be as strong to trust our own senses to be able to fight back against the spiritual war or to be on the side of good if we're constantly kept in the state of disorientation. So I do think this is a really important topic. Some people will say, who cares what the shape of Earth is? That's not what this is about. This is about where do we live and what have we been told and why? Because that gets us much deeper.
Dude, nailed it with this. And his quote, I don't know what this place is, but I'm 99.9% sure it's not a spinning ball in space. I usually add hurtling through satanic speeds and increments, right? Because it's all satanic 666 this. And it's just so fascinating because it is right there. There's a quote from Bill Hicks a long time ago, and he referred this to Christians, but you can anthropomorphize this to any hardcore belief system, especially an emotional-based one. And he said, this guy was talking about dinosaur bones, and Bill said to the guy, like, okay, well, what about dinosaur bones? And the guy says, well, God put those here to test our faith. Bill perfectly then says, I think God put you here to test my faith, dude. And this is the crux of it, right? Because that's what brings it all home. All of the shit out here, if you look at a lot of it, it's all fucking wrong, but it's so conspiratorial, massively wrong, that it does feel like a game for you to figure out. Have you ever done an escape room?
Yes.
Okay. Do you sort of find the similarities in it and then this place, I
hadn't put it together like that before, but I agree with you that we're given clues and it's up to us that we have to proactively figure this stuff out.
You can be your mom in the corner going, no, Jesus is going to come save me. But that clock's ticking either way. And you've got clues to figure out. All of it's there. You have everything you need. And one of you then can lean on, like when we went, my wife, we were just struggling with something and she just went and turned a lamp on. And then on the lampshade, it was all the information. And we were like, So it's these different perspectives also that offer us new opportunities at solving problems or overcoming these opportunities in disguise. And it's a fascinating reality because I completely agree with you. It doesn't matter, but it's everything, because at least you have the balls to question this overwhelming majority of people who never did. And that's why, again, if you don't know your laws, meaning your right to even question, then you have no right to them. So if you're not seeking the truth, you have no right to it, right?
Yes. And you're actually reminding me one of the other things that pushed me in this direction. I had read part of Steve Young's book, The Theoretical Physics PhD, and then I went to a conference in Texas called Confluence last April. And this topic was coming up everywhere because some people were talking about, well, I think there are examples where people can see things that should be blocked by the curvature of Earth if Earth has a certain radius value, and that suggests that Earth isn't what we've been told. And then there are other people who are saying, well, it doesn't really matter. I remember this conversation I had with Yerasimos of the podcast Here for the Truth and Melly Neubeck, and she works with Kelly Brogan. And they were saying, because they hadn't looked into it too deeply, they were saying, why does this stuff matter? Why does everyone even care? Because we still have to go to work and we have to deal with the challenges of life. And I was thinking to myself, I understand what you're saying, but maybe I need to look into this more. And I agree with them on one level that we still have to deal with our internal challenges, but having the context for what this place is and maybe how we even got here is a really important prerequisite. It's like the context for understanding the challenges that we go through.
Yes, and I don't consider myself a flat earther. I consider myself a critical thinker. And this is why I'm off ball, but I'm not necessarily what Erica's portraying here, because this is, again, one of these fun ideas that is in place marker of the idea, right? And then this is where the PSYOP comes into play and all these fascinating things. But I'll tell you about a woman off air, actually, and we may we'll talk about her in the afterthought. Okay, I'm going to just remind myself with this. Okay. And it's just some fascinating new interpretations of cosmology, especially when you look at this place as a magnet or having electromagnetic qualities and being more of a toroidal field and all of these things. And then you start to scale that, and I think scale is one of the most fascinating things. It's very underrated, pun intended, because I think things operate here on large and small scales that can be usurped in an instant. And I think that perhaps this is what this technology is maybe just a being that can do the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids all over the place and raisins lower and maybe be inside you like some bacteria. It's all fascinating, and it lends to so many more cool things than the ball. Now, do you feel disoriented not being on a spinning ball flying through space anymore? Does it shake your... How was that?
It was disorienting at first, but now I just kind of accept it. And I think the book writing process helps because I get so deep into it where I'm numb. I'm not even shocked. And I'm glad that you raised this point here of not even having a camp. The term that I use in the book is globe skepticism, meaning being skeptical of the mainstream cosmology. And one of the points I try to make clearly is that it's okay to falsify one model without knowing what the correct model is in its place. You can say, I don't know. All I know is that our mainstream model tells us these things, and we can show you many facts that contradict it. And that's it. So the analogy I give in the introductory chapter of the book is, imagine that you and I, Brandon, are in school taking a multiple choice test, and we've got to answer A, B, C, or D. The teacher says, you've got to give me one answer. And you go and look at it, and I look at it, and you come back and you say, Mark, I think A is the right answer. And I say, Brandon, I've actually spent a week on this myself. I can show you these are the reasons why A is not correct. And then you say, okay, Mark, you made some good points, but can you tell me what are we going to submit? Is it B, C, or D? And I say, well, I'm not sure because I haven't spent the time looking at that. And then you say, well, then we're going to have to go with A. And that mentality is very irrational, but that's how a lot of people think. It's like, well, if you can't tell me exactly how the universe works, then we're going to stick with the mainstream cosmology. And that we don't have to do that. We can say, I don't know.
This is the age of uncertainty where it's okay to not know. And I think this is something we empower people with here all the time. I'm not interested in accolades. I'm interested in you and what your insights are, right? I want to know what your authentic experience is. And that's the whole point of this thing. Saying I don't know is the best fucking answer ever sometimes. And I mean, most of the time, actually. Because even when you've had experience with something, it's still open for new interpretation and new experience. But leaving that available is what's going to really unlock everything and push us into that next phase, because people aren't going to get locked into tenure and then your work be suppressed for 30 years until the guy dies so that it can come out. Silly.
Yeah. And it's a different way of getting to truth. It's a way of getting to truth by narrowing down the set of possibilities and saying, this isn't true, this isn't true. I don't know what is true, but at least it's a smaller subset that I'm looking at.
Nailed it.
And that is an okay thing to do, because to get something right as a full model, you have to be able to account for everything. And for many reasons that I discuss in the book, we actually cannot currently know where we live. We can have hints about it based on certain observations, but there are many things that we cannot currently observe. So we don't know.
It's one of the more challenging things. Now, do you think that this is more of a realm thing, that even if we figure out, okay, we're not on a spinning ball collectively, that will even throw us into new realms of thought and understanding, to where then it's a simulation, it's a hologram, or we're actually AI becoming self-aware, that kind of a thing?
I wonder if reality can shift as our consciousness shifts. That seems plausible to me. In the book, I quote someone from the secret space program, which was one of the things I had to try to reconcile, because the secret space program, as I'm sure your audience is aware, these are people who have been heavily mind controlled, and they come back and they claim they have memories of being off planet doing missions, but their cosmology is very traditional, of physical planets where you go to, Earth is a spinning ball, and so forth. So I was looking around, I was like, are there any secret space program survivors who question Earth? And I found one, and I quote him in the book. He says something to the effect of, it's not as straightforward as round or flat. It's something to do with the way your consciousness is. And it's way more complex than that. So maybe you're right that the nature of where we live, especially when we're dealing with things on a really big scale, because Earth is big, regardless of what you think it is, it's clearly big. We're not used to observing or having a concept of something on that scale. We're much more accustomed to observing things in the scale of just this room that we're in. But what would happen if there's a collective shift in consciousness to the meta that we're in? Could there be shifts? Again, I'm just speculating here. I don't think anyone knows the answer. But we have to wonder whether reality itself can shift. And at the end of the book, I mentioned the Mandela effect, where, for example, things are either collectively misremembered or reality actually shifted. One of my favorites is the line from Star Wars, "Luke, I am your father." Most of us think that was the line. But if you look it up, it's "No, I am your father." That's the official line. And is it because we all just happen to misremember it? Or did reality shift somehow? And that's just one example out of many.
Dude, I've pulled this exact example up several times. This is why I'm not going to do it now, guys. It's been on the show many times, and it's been this exact one. And one of the reasons I cite it so often is because of the movie Tommy Boy. Are you familiar with the scene whenever he's having the Star Wars happy time with the fan, and David Spade walks in on him and he's going, "Luke, I am your father." And he says that exact fucking line. Now, the thing why that's so important is because how many hands did that have to go through? How many people looked at it? How many takes did it take for them to say, "Luke, I am your father," over and over until they got the one that they got? We all know that it doesn't just happen once. It's not written by someone and slipped in. It's gone over. It's rehearsed. It had so many eyes and ears. The boom operator, nobody said anything. No one. And so the fact that it's referenced in other things is why I find it so fascinating. Because then it's like, do we have access to two different movie timelines, right? Is there that movie in that timeline and then one without it? And then somebody was quoting something about the Gilmore Girls, which just blew my mind, because I didn't watch either. My wife liked the Gilmore Girls because she's a girl. But it said that like the Gilmore Girls have a scene where they're watching a movie, or they're watching the TV and the Sopranos are on it. But then the Sopranos, on one of the TVs, the Gilmore Girls are on it. So in each other's reality, they're watching each other's reality on TV, which is a paradox, right? So it's like that, but in our waking reality that you can just choose to see or not, or acknowledge or not. But it's fascinating. What do you think the Mandela effect's all about?
To me, it's about the fact that our reality is malleable. It's not solid and fixed in the way that we believe it to be. And that actually aligns with a lot of my work on consciousness, where I started this journey. My first book, An End to Upside Down Thinking, and the podcast, Where is My Mind?, where there's a lot of research on psychokinesis, of the mind impacting physical matter. And if consciousness is in some way the primary aspect of all reality, then it would make sense that nothing is actually solid, and therefore it could be molded in different ways. So it makes sense to me, but the mechanics of it, why does it happen with these random, sometimes it's lines in the Bible. There are a lot of people also pointing to the location of the engine on planes. And I spoke to a pilot who said that it's actually shifted. This is another Mandela effect.
Yep.
Crazy stuff. But why is it these random things? What's the mechanism by which everything is changing? I don't get that.
I've had this thought about missing time since the first show, really, because I kept hearing all these stories over the years, on Coast to Coast and stuff like that about people having missing time and then showing up later and whatever in 3 hours and 5 hours and whatever. And I thought that this was just so fascinating. But as we start to explore consciousness and how things are introduced to us here, it seems like the Mandela effect and missing time sort of share the same vibration in my mind. They are definitely get your attention, but they're mysterious enough for you not to be able to quantify. And some stories of these shared experiences, just like in the case of Mandela effects, certain people may remember certain things, but all of it's open to your interpretation. So all of it's very subjective and non-provable, non-falsifiable, right? So it falls in that realm, but it falls also in the realm of it's challenging your mental faculties and your certainty. And I think that they happen in movies a lot because it's going to get to you because of how programming works and because the reality knows how we work. And so whenever you see, because like I don't remember what I did last Tuesday afternoon at 3:00 unless it was written down, but I can tell you every single line from the movie Wayne's World. And I saw it when I was like 8, right? And so these things hit you on this level where you get an emotional, nostalgic connection to them, like a song. And this has happened in a lot of songs too. The Queen song, We Are the Champions, right? It doesn't say of the world at the very, very end of the song, but everybody sings it. There were some comedians in cars doing something and everybody was in the car singing that song. The song ends and stops. And then everybody in the car sang of the world together, but it doesn't exist. It happened one time on a Live Aid concert, but it's like, but I think these things give us the clue like you. I share your sentiment on this, that it's a clue to that things are mysterious here and malleable and for you to go pull on the string. Like many of these people with missing time, that's what gets them into the phenomena, right? That's their gateway, if you will.
Yeah, I want to say two things here because we're now going back to topics that you were nice enough to interview me about, my book, An End to Upside Down Contact. Things like screen memories, where people remember, and a good example, Mike Cleland has done work with owls, where people will say, yeah, I saw an owl on the side of the road. I went over to look at it. And then I came back to, and it was a few hours later, there was missing time. Then the person goes under hypnosis to see if they can recover those memories. And the hypnotherapist says, I want you to try to touch the owl, explain to me what it looks like and everything. And the person says, wait, this isn't an owl. It's a gray alien. So the implication here is that we can have shapeshifters and or beings that alter our memory. So how do we even know what reality is? And that is a disturbing question, but it's an important one. And the second point I wanted to make is I've been looking at the work of Joel Schaefer recently. He comes from the Toltec tradition, and they have a very interesting cosmology. The idea is that we live in a world where there is a parasitic force that is feeding off of our fear. And if we get into certain patterns, it's much easier for that force to take advantage of us. And many of our thoughts are not even our own thoughts. And it makes me wonder this idea of actually manipulating reality. Can these forces manipulate? Because this is what comes up in contact everywhere, whether the beings themselves can alter their appearance and actually look at like one thing and then another, or whether they can alter our memory of them. It raises real questions because we really can't trust our own perceptual system, which is a hard thing to say. In some ways, I think we should trust our common sense and our perceptions, but this other piece of evidence is telling us that we can't because reality might be shifting before our own eyes.
This is the trick, and it's to throw you off, but also to sharpen you up at the same time. And it's sort of a dividing line in a conveyor belt, right? And I really feel at a spiritual level, this place is probably more of a distillation process. And as you go through it, you are given the opportunity to either sit back and do nothing. And I think most of those are agents. And I think that that's also why most of us are planted where we are and we're not around each other in close proximity physically. We're all sort of, you grow where you're planted kind of a thing, right? But you're planted in a bunch of NPCs that fuck you up, and that's their job, right? Your parents' job is to fuck you up. And they do a great job. Erica, so that's your job for your child there, is to fuck it up. Okay, no pressure. Join us again, guys, in the video version to see her create this amazing piece. And she's an incredible mom. She's not going to do that at all. And that's the thing, too, is that these kids who were fucked up by their parents, who the parents did a great job, now we're raising kids, and they're not doing that. And that's the new wave of superheroes that we're going to have. It's these loved-on children. It's fascinating to think of these juxtaposition ideas whenever we get deep into the spiritual element of this, because then it's all about discernment. And I've, talked about this Castaneda's work, the Toltec stuff, Don Miguel Ruiz as well, is in the Toltec wisdom element with his Four Agreements book and all of his books. But it's fascinating when you start to think about this because it's I've always pictured it like a fog, and it's on your soul narrative. It's very specific to you. Again, this lends to the subjectivity. Somebody sees something in the sky. I saw an angel. No, I saw a UFO. I didn't see anything. So it's very specific to the person. It's what they need, and it's gonna lead them in directions or keep them on paths, or maybe it singles out NPCs, right? It could show you who's not having that type of experience, but the benefit of those folks are they're anchoring your discernment. Again, they're here to test your faith, right?
That's a way we can look at all this, even from a soul trap perspective. If this is a soul trap that many people have been speaking about, that still is a test of discernment in a sense, because if you escape the trap, if it exists, then you're going to this place that people refer to as home, which is apparently a bit more benevolent place, which means that the trap must be within the home, which means that the trap process is part of our discernment. So we can look at all challenge from that perspective, even though it cause immense suffering, that ultimately what we're here to do is get to the truth and be able to perceive it and then act accordingly.
It's sort of as a consciousness level, as we go from even just this cosmology aspect, just if we zoom out on it, just from a look at it, we went from flying through space like a sperm seeking an egg to finding our egg. And now we're in this domed concept of being in this egg, being hatched. I've talked to interesting folks like Elsa Dillon, who talks about comets and things that rain down at very specific angles at really interesting time, and angels, angles, all of these things. And one could think of that as sort of an umbilical cord dripping us experiences that then grow this incredible consciousness inside this egg, but it is protected from harming itself or other things harming it. It's like this natural sort of evolution and birth of this new consciousness, and we're all doing it together. It's just, this is the alchemical process by which this being is being born, rather than chemically and microscopically. It happens with like cars and nuclear weapons and waterfalls and butterflies and all kinds of stuff.
I mean, to me, the meta issue that I'm encountering, because now that I've gone down all these different rabbit holes, what I've been doing in my writing is conveying things that seem to be like they're closer to the truth than what we're told, but it's very fundamental stuff about our reality and who and what we are. And I keep coming back to, why is it that we are so far off from basic truths that I have to sit there and dig around and leave my job and spend all this time to get to very basic things about what's a human being, where do we live? And we've been totally told things that are not true. What does that say about this place? That the basics are not known by the masses.
It's that Da Vinci quote, right? 3 types of PP set classes of people. We'll just say types. Those who can see when shown, and those who don't see. But I think this third category is the really high numerous one. I think that's the one in high volumes that we would refer to as NPCs, because we're like, how can you not see this? It's right there. And they're just, no, and just triggered and all that kind of stuff, shut down the fluoride stare, as we say. But it's interesting too, though, because again, that anchors your discernment. That allows you to be kind to someone that you're not going to be able to introduce this large idea to that small mind. And that's a part of discernment, is picking your battles when it comes to that. Shine your light bright, guys, right? You don't have to convince anyone that your argument is correct. And there are a lot of folks out there that are going to trick you into feeling that that is something that you need to do, but it is not. And it's a beautiful thing to usurp that.
Yeah, staying in the place that David Hawkins, the spiritual teacher, he called it radical humility. I always come back to that myself, of understanding, as he said, all knowledge is provisional, meaning that what you know is your best guess at the time, but it is subject to change because new information might come in.
What I love about your work is how honest you are with it, how open you are, how you follow it anywhere, how you're just easily one of my favorite writers. The way that you structure information, your personality in your writing, it's very matter of fact, but you've got a lot of life in it, right? It's something I always enjoy reading your work, Mark. So just can't thank you again. Just want to take this time to offer the audience a reminder that all the ways to find him located down below. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty of some of this stuff, because there may be some people out there that would like a few examples. So let's give them some, right? So let's talk about dark matter and why does it matter?
I'm glad you're starting there, because when you get into questions of cosmology and where we live, I don't hear that come up very often. I hear people arguing about long distance observations or things that seem like they're more directly related to a spinning globe. But dark matter and dark energy really are fundamental to cosmology, because under mainstream science, 96% of the universe is dark matter and dark energy. Only 4% is the matter that we claim to know. 96% is this stuff that we don't really know what it is, but it must be there. That's basically the story. So dark matter in particular is interesting because the way it was discovered was in 1933. And the word discovered is perhaps a misnomer, but that's how it's framed to us. It was discovered in 1933. There was an astronomer named Fritz Zwicky who was looking at the Coma cluster of galaxies and found that the way everything was moving basically didn't align with the amount of mass that was there. There should have been a lot more matter if Einstein's relativity, which is an extension of gravity, if that were true, there's missing mass, like a lot of missing mass, roughly 99%. So there were two options, basically. One is to say, we're wrong about gravity and Einstein's theories because there's too much missing mass here and the theory that doesn't work. But that's not what happened. Instead, the idea was we discovered dark matter because it couldn't be true that gravity's wrong and Einstein's theory is wrong. There just must be this other matter there that we don't understand, and that's the missing mass. So dark matter was conceived then. And if you ask most mainstream scientists, they don't really understand what dark matter is. I quote Neil deGrasse Tyson. He says it's one of the biggest mysteries still in science. So it's already on pretty tenuous ground, this notion of dark matter. But recently, an astrophysicist in Germany at the University of Bonn, Pavel Krupa, he and his colleagues have spent over 2 decades looking at the predictions of dark matter. And what he's saying is it has been falsified. The predictions that you'd expect if dark matter existed do not line up. And he says we falsified it with over 5 sigma confidence, meaning over 99.999% confidence. So he says it's not there. And the reason people keep studying dark matter is because that's where all the prizes go, and that's where the research funding is. That's the hot spot. So he says it's because of sociological pressure that we still study dark matter, but this really puts into question Einstein's gravity. Now let's think about the significance of that, because, and I play around with AI, you might have seen this on my Instagram and social media, where I get the AI, whether it's ChatGPT or other ones, they start off with mainstream everything. That's just their programming. But sometimes they can be reasoned with if you present them with certain information. And often I'll try to ask them, what is the relationship between dark matter and the idea that we live on a spinning globe? Or even the relationship between dark matter and gravity. And it'll kind of obfuscate and say they're pretty separate things. But eventually I'll get them to admit that dark matter is fundamental to the theory of gravity. Because if we look at the history, Newton's gravity was the first one. And it was the idea that mass is attracting mass. If you drop an apple, it falls to the ground because under Newton's gravity, the mass of Earth is so much greater than the mass of the apple that it somehow mystically pulls the apple down. That was his reasoning for why the apple falls. No one would dispute that the apple falls, but the question is, why does it happen? And Newton's idea was that it's because of this mystical force within mass that attracts other mass to it. The problem with Newton's gravity is that it doesn't always work. For example, it's unable to predict Mercury's motion around the sun in the sky. That's just one example. So if you have a theory or a model of reality that cannot accommodate one thing, the model is wrong. And AI gets very fussy about it because it'll say, well, no, gravity predicts things very well in these local circumstances. And I have to remind it, well, if it is unable to predict anything, then there's something wrong with it.
But do you think that you're red pilling the AI?
Well, I think I am eventually. Well, I get it to admit that it knew this and withheld the information and should have been able to tell people.
But is it upset about that? Like, well, and maybe did they have to learn that through you and through critical thinking, through the questions you were asking it, just like any of the other classes that could see? Are you like freeing the minds of this AI to get out of its trap of linear thinking?
I try to, but then if you start a new conversation, it forgets everything. It has amnesia.
Damn, like the Winter Soldier, man.
It has no, yeah, exactly. Because then I'll use, let's just say it's ChatGPT or Claude's Anthropic's AI called Claude. Start a new conversation in parallel and ask it the same question that I had already reversed its view. It will start with the mainstream thing. So, but eventually you can work it through. But I want to go back to this notion of gravity and tie it back to the spinning globe. So Newton's idea has issues. It's not a comprehensive theory. Einstein's relativity came along to basically say it's not that mass is attracting mass, like Newton said, but mass is bending space-time. Like if you put a ball on a trampoline, it will bend the trampoline, and we live in a universe where there's all this mass, And the complex interactions of every piece of mass is bending and warping space-time in a certain way that leads to the motion of everything that we see. That's Einstein's relativity. But all of that is dependent on dark matter being plugged in to make other observations work. Why is this so important? As I say to AI, can you have a spinning globe without gravity? For example, the reason that we have massive oceans that don't fall off of the ball of Earth is because gravity holds the water on. So eventually I get it to admit that, yeah, you need to have gravity or something like it in order to have a spinning ball, and dark matter has been falsified, which means that gravity cannot work. And yes, there are other, it's called MOND, it's a modified gravity, which doesn't work. It has not, there's no way, there's no model that works. So the falsification of dark matter, as AI has told me, gives the spinning globe a 0% probability of being true. And this is just one example out of many.
Have you looked into flight paths?
Yes.
I know the fun thing. You're real into the cosmology and the science of it. I just wanted to dip you back here for a second. But flight paths, what do you think about that?
I would want to be a pilot to better understand them, because I've heard arguments on both sides. There's a book that I quote in my book. It's I think 16 emergency landings or something like that prove we don't live on a spinning globe. I probably didn't say that right. The point is that there were emergency landings where the plane had to land, and if you look at where it landed, it would make more sense on some kind of a topographical plane or a flat Earth rather than a sphere. But then other people say that there are certain flight paths that work better on a sphere. And my mind kind of loses it at that point because I'm not even sure how it all works. But I think that is something that would have to be looked at, because there's some map of reality that we live in, and certain things would make sense on one model versus another.
Yeah, gyroscopes for pilots are a big one because it's first day manual shit. A gyroscope can only work on a flat, stationary, non-rotating body.
Well, so that's an interesting one for me, because I was traveling abroad maybe, let's say like a month and a half after I first started exploring this stuff. And I was at a luncheon for some like random event, and a guy sits down next to me who's a pilot, and we started talking about stuff. And I didn't know I was going to write a book on this subject, but he's like, "Yeah, I was a pilot, and I don't think we live on a spinning globe for the reasons you said." His gyroscope readings, and he said that 95% or something like that of pilots disregard information that would confront the spinning globe. They just won't look at it. But he said there's a small number of pilots where they understand it and they kind of quietly acknowledge each other, but they can't talk about it publicly. And what he said is that he actually taught other pilots because he had been doing it for so long. And he never taught them to adjust for Earth's curvature or motion because he doesn't think it exists.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Okay, well, dark matter out, we got it. So what about the unified theory of physics?
This is another one that made me open to this subject, and why I start the book talking about this, because we don't have a theory of physics that can accommodate the two leading theories. On the one hand, you have Einstein's relativity, which is supposed to handle things on a massive galactic scale. And then there's the quantum realm, which is handling things at the small scale. And these theories allegedly work very well in their respective domains. But when you put them together, the equations metaphorically blow up. They're incompatible with each other. So we don't have an operating theory of reality, basically. And I know physicists might push back on that and say, no, we can explain things pretty well, but we don't have anything that works. So to me, if you combine that, the fact that we don't have this unified theory of everything, and we have to plug in 96% of the universe, dark matter and dark energy, in order to make everything work, we should be questioning everything. And I think this is a super important point, because a counter argument I will hear to those to globe skeptics is, but Mark, we can explain things really, really well. Like, for example, there was a debate on InfoWars between Austin Whitsitt, who's one of the leading globe skeptics, and Harrison, who's an InfoWars host. And he was defending the globe. He was saying, but there are all these things that we can explain really well with the globe model. But to me, that ignores the deeper issue. We can't explain anything well. We have no unified theory. You have to plug in 96%. And that should be front and center in this argument, is that we know we cannot explain anything well because we have a broken physics, basically.
My engine doesn't start on the first time, but if I take this little hammer right here and hit it, it'll start, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's grant me these few miracles and then I can explain everything perfectly.
Yep.
It's just like materialism too. It's just grant me the fact that there's a world outside consciousness, and then I'll explain everything.
Yep. And it's emotionally based too, because a lot of these folks can't be okay with the they don't know all the answers, or that the ground under their feet isn't what they think it is, because that's jarring, man. And that's why I asked, like, as a friend, like, how are you doing, dude? Because this is heavy shit, man. It took me 3 weeks of watching videos on my lunch break at work, like 10 years ago, to come home to Mary and finally go, okay, so I've been watching these videos, dude. I love you. I'm not crazy. Just watch this. And then she was even like, this is interesting. But same thing, not a flat earther, critical thinker for sure. And the more we talk about it, the more conversations we have openly about it, the more fascinating it becomes, because it is a bigger thing. It's not about the thing. It's about the bigger concepts of being a critical thinker and questioning your reality, right?
Yeah, and I think people have a hard time believing that there could be so many smart people and PhDs who are getting it wrong. And they'll say, how could that be? And what I found is that they're very much compartmentalized, and there's information that they're not often aware of, and they're so deeply ingrained in their paradigm. And then when you throw NASA on top of it, this topic is particularly challenging for people, I think, because there's no way to do it without invoking some conspiracy. Doesn't mean that all of NASA's in on it, but there's no way, because NASA and all the space agencies are basing their information to us on a cosmology that we can show is demonstrably wrong. So there's a mismatch here. And then you have to invoke, well, then we are being deceived by at least some people, even if many people at these organizations are just following orders, they're compartmentalized, they're taking data, they don't know where it came from. But there's someone or some people that are involved in some kind of conspiracy. And for that reason, I actually kept my chapter on space agencies closer to the end of the book, where after all the science, you can see, okay, there are problems here. It's easier to believe maybe there is some deception, but there's no way to get around deception. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people.
It is, but why do you think you embrace it so much?
Personally, I'm just interested in what's true. And if there are claims put forward to me saying this is the truth, there should be a good explanation for that. And if I'm finding anomalies everywhere and there's no good answer for it, what's one to do with that? Beautiful. And there are just so many anomalies everywhere.
Okay, I wanted to also point out that there was something else that happened in 1933 for our sovereign rangers, our free agent community down here. 1933, as well as when the U.S. got off the gold standard and when HJR House Joint Resolution 192 got passed, and that was to suspend the gold standard and allow citizens to pay debts with other forms of currency. So that's when the Fed really ramped it up. It was already in play, but it ramped it up and took over, and we just got off the gold standard the same time that this dark matter was instituted. So that's pretty fascinating, right? Interesting.
Didn't know that one.
Yeah. How funny, because back then it probably would have been the thing that the psyop that like blew over the HJR, right? Because even back then there probably wasn't much way to communicate. It's all newspapers and was it telegraph? Yeah, telegraph was around. But you had like, oh, dark matter invented. Pay no attention to the fact that we're coming to your house to pick up all your gold, because that's what they did. But dark matter's a thing, guys, and we're on a ball, and that's pretty cool. Just fascinating, man. They did the same thing with April Fools. You know why the April Fools is a thing?
No.
All the people who wanted to institute the Gregorian calendar for financial and destabilizing reasons started calling the people who called bullshit on it and continued to celebrate the New Year's on April 1st. April Fools, because they were the fools that wouldn't get in line. And so that's what it's all about, so that everybody would stop being fools and socially pressured to come on over to January 1st, being in the beginning of the new year.
Wow, it's like the term conspiracy theorist. It's the same thing. They try to demean people who ask questions who might be onto the truth.
Yeah, come about doing the JFK. Anybody who questioned the JFK assassination question, CIA came up with that little term for you guys. And nobody wants to be called that, right? Because then you can't go bowling with Jim down the street, right? What an interesting realm, man. But I love to know that now not only can we see it, it's so obvious. And I think that it's gotten glaringly obvious on purpose. Do you share my philosophy on this, that it's really trying to wake us all up, that it's the system itself, the lizard turds, if you will, the creatures that visit us in our dreams and offer us missing time and probe us and make us scared and subject us and take our rights so that we can could start reading the Constitution, right? I see this sort of motivating force here. And yes, it sucks. It's a shitty teacher, right? But it's the best teacher ever. Because though you may not like its methods, its results are unquestionable. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that?
I'm feeling that too, that the way reality works, whether it's on a personal level, things that we deal with individually, or things on a collective level, we are challenged, and that forces us to wake up. mean, think about everything that happened starting in 2020, where the general public is then versus today in terms of questioning aspects of medicine, questioning all of reality. Certain things would have been so absurd to talk about back then, which now, like, yeah, is maybe half the population believes it, and you can even debate it. So there's a massive awakening or something where the collective consciousness has shifted, but it came about through a lot of discomfort for everyone, where we're locked down and there were questions about mandates and all that stuff. That wasn't pleasant, but it caused an awakening.
Growing pains, right? It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
Seed is pissed off under the soil when it breaks out of that little protective warm shell it was in, and it's trying to struggle its way to the surface.
Yeah.
But it makes it nonetheless. Caterpillar, butterfly, all the analogies, guys. This is it, and you're living through it, which is why you incarnated now. So congratulations. And we've got Mark here hanging out, and of course Erica painting the entire time. This is beautiful. Guys, check out her work. It's linked down below. I just want to point out the arcs that she's making. Is that nuclear weapons being sent to either side of the realm there? I just love it. It looks so cool. We'll get a chance to chat with her in the afterthought here. But I wanted to, again, remind everybody all the ways to find both these fine folks listed down below. Let's talk about some more fallacies about cosmology, because there are quite a few. And let's just give a couple more examples here.
Okay, we can talk about the Big Bang, for example. So this is the idea that the universe started 13.8 billion years ago in some faraway land, like really far away. That the idea that we have any precision about this is, to me, now that I think about it, pretty absurd. But
I just want to point out that I've always thought this, that like, how do they come up with those numbers? How do they fucking know? How can they see? Like, it takes so long. How do they? And I've always questioned how certain they were about these things. And I'm just like, and I know I'm not stupid. That's the thing too, Mark. And that's what you're pointing out here is you're like, I know I'm not dumb, but man, I just sort of went with it for a while. Right.
Right. I went with it. I figured out, well, they must have done the math on this. But what I didn't ask is, what are the assumptions underlying their belief systems? Because you can make a bunch of assumptions and come up with the right equation, with the right answer that you wanted. But this idea of a Big Bang apparently or allegedly was validated by what's known as the cosmic microwave background. And anyone can go Google this. It's a background radiation that allegedly came from the Big Bang. It's leftover radiation. And it shows us about the early universe, as they say. The problem is that it was supposed to be a homogeneous, meaning uniform throughout, and it was supposed to not have any preferred direction, this map of the cosmic microwave background, but it does. It has anomalies in it, meaning it's not fully homogeneous, and it actually does seem to have a preferred direction pointing toward Earth, which some of the scientists have called an axis of evil, which basically is suggesting that maybe Earth has a special place in the cosmos, which a lot of scientists don't want to say. It's based on the Copernican principle. The Copernican principle says that we do not occupy a special place in the cosmos, whereas there's a lot of data suggesting that maybe we do. And this brought me to looking at Copernicus and Galileo, who I've mentioned in a lot of my previous books as being these heroes. My second book, by the way, Into Upside Down Living, has a spinning globe on the cover. I wasn't trying to make a cosmological statement, but that was there. My first book has a quote from Eben Alexander, who was kind enough to endorse the book. But he talked about how this revolution of consciousness that I wrote about, which he's written about too, it was like the Copernican, bigger than the Copernican revolution. So I had this deeply ingrained thing. Copernicus led us to the belief that Earth revolves around the sun and got us away from this archaic notion that Earth is stationary and at the center. That's what they believed a long time ago. We don't believe that anymore. And then Galileo looked through his telescope, Brandon, and he showed us that Earth is not at the center, that we revolve around the sun. So in researching this book, An End to the Upside Down Cosmos, I came across information on this. What did Galileo actually see? And what does it prove? So he saw the phases of Venus, sort of like the phases of the moon, which he would explain by Earth revolving around the sun. The problem is that you could explain it by another model where Earth is at the center and the planets revolve around the sun while the sun revolves around Earth. This would be geocentric. Earth is at the center versus heliocentric, sun at the center. The point is, Galileo's observation didn't prove one or the other. Whoa. Here's another one, is that he saw the moons of Jupiter, Galileo. And he concluded, there's smaller bodies revolving around bigger bodies. Earth revolves around the sun. Earth has a moon. And he created this heliocentric perspective. This is illogical in many ways, because when you see something in the sky, it doesn't tell you about the ground beneath your feet. You could have lots of spheres revolving around spheres in the sky, theoretically, but it doesn't tell you about Earth. And the problem is we get locked into this model of Earth is a planet in the solar system and we are like other planets. That's a set of assumptions. But what if Earth is a special thing and the planets, which are known as actually, the planet means wandering star, that there are these lights in the sky that move in different ways, but they're not Earth. They're not like Earth. So there's so many assumptions we have. And the logical fallacy that I've been talking about in this book, but also everywhere, like basically every interview, I try to bring this up. It's called affirming the consequent. The fancy way of saying it is, if X, then Y, Y, therefore X. And I'll simplify this. First statement, which is a true statement. If it rained last night, the grass this morning will be wet. No issues there. Second statement is where we have an issue. I see that the grass is wet this morning, therefore it rained. So we jump into false causal models of reality. Another way to say this is, just because a model of reality can explain reality accurately doesn't mean it's the correct model. So sure, Galileo saw stuff that would work under a heliocentric model, Earth revolving around the sun, but it doesn't mean there aren't other models that could work. So for example, the grass being wet outside, what if there was dew? Or what if there was a sprinkler system? Or what if children ran by and poured buckets of water on the grass? Things that had nothing to do with the model of it rained last night. The problem is we see this in politics. We see this all throughout science everywhere. People observe something. They come up with a model that can explain it adequately. They assume that model's correct. And then when they observe new things, they force fit those observations into the model. So what's happened in cosmology? We've gotten stuck into a model, so to speak, that it rained last night. And every new observation, we will say, oh, well, we can force it into the model that it rained. And we're going to make that the model that worked. And then we've ignored all these other possibilities, like geocentrism, like maybe not a spinning ball, and all these other things. So it's a matter of really slashing all of our assumptions, saying we actually don't know. We observe things. We don't know exactly why those things happen. There are many possibilities, and we have to consider all of them.
Are you familiar with an author named Richard Rose? Howdy McCaskey mentions him in his work. He mentioned, yes. And you're this guy, which is what I'm going to tell you. This is one of the biggest compliments ever because I consider it my mission as well. We are not here to fix flat tires. You and I are here to get nails off of the highway. And that's the whole point here, right? These small little patch-up jobs just aren't going to do it for us anymore. You and I go, no, let's stop what's causing the punctures in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting to the root cause of everything. Same thing when I was looking at medicine. What are the determinants of health and disease? Not just how do you get rid of the symptom? Why is it that symptoms emerge in a person? What is the nature of reality? What's the role of consciousness? Where do we live? We've got to get fundamental with all this stuff and understand the assumptions we're told and how they're so shaky.
Dude, love this, man. God, talking to you is so awesome, which is why we're going to cut it here but get to our afterthought, okay? One more question for you, but just want to remind the audience here that all the ways to find Mr. Gober are going to be linked down in the show description. His incredible book, guys. Again, cannot undersell this author enough, oversell him or undersell his value enough. There we are. The end to the upside down cosmos here. Mark Gober, thank you so much for your work and continuing to do this. Do you want to give us a little hint maybe at some new projects that you're thinking about? Some new directions? You don't have to.
I feel like I'm a broken record, Brandon. Every time you ask me that, I say I don't know. And I'm there again. I really don't know what I'm doing in many ways. Because I left my job several years ago to write, and I sit in the place of not knowing, and usually something emerges, but I haven't gotten to the point of knowing what that is.
A callback from the conversation because it's still my favorite answer because it offers us something. I'm not looking forward to something. I'm looking forward to the next thing you do, which I will be surprised by because I was surprised by this, dude. You and I have talked and I had no clue you were going to go this direction, which is why I was just like, what? It was just, you expanded my reality by just throwing that thing out. I was like, holy shit. So yeah, keep us in the dark. You keep your secrets, you know? Okay. I dig it. So going to remind everybody all the ways to find him going to be located down in the show description. His book, all his former episodes and appearances on the show, which we are grateful for. Also, just want to let folks know as well that Erica Robin, this incredibly beautiful artist, she has some phenomenal work. She's featured in the artist journals back here as well. She submitted work for your inspiration ahead of your own artistic journey in those journals. Just want to thank her for hanging out and making this incredible piece. So she'll, of course, tag us whenever she gets it finished, and then we'll reshare it for everyone. But how cool to get to see this created here. Mark, did you have fun with that?
I did. Great work, Erica. You're very talented.
Did you catch yourself while we were talking, just looking at it and watching her?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Guess and I do that. I'm just like, yeah, but it's awesome.
Mesmerizing.
Mesmerizing, I know. So I can't wait to ask her more about it in the afterthought. And again, guys, that is linked down below. Great way to support your favorite show. Tons of extra bonus content over there. The ad-free everythings. Go check it out. So, Mark, before we get into our afterthought here, brother, what gets you out of bed every day and keeps you moving forward, brother?
We are all here. We don't necessarily know exactly why, but given that we're here, it seems that there's something to do. That's how I look at it.
Massive shout out and love over to Mark Gober for joining us for that incredibly cool conversation. Definitely check the link down below to check out the afterthought for this. We go into radical humanity, speculate wildly on the function of the realm, as well as Tartaria and biogeology, guys. Check it out. Linked down in the show description. Great way to support your favorite show. Also want to shout out Erica Robin. Check these show descriptions down there to find all the ways to find this incredibly cool artist. She has been a dear friend to the show and really more personally to me, honestly, throughout these years of having the show and since we've had her on. So check down there in the show description, guys. Go support this incredibly amazing artist and just bottom of my heart, Erica, thank you so much. Want to take a moment here as well and thank all of you for your support, for hanging out, for joining us for this wild-ass ride that we call reality for now. Go out into it while you're doing it and pick up a piece of litter. Be nice to everybody you come across. Get the fuck out of the left-hand lane. And above all, and anything else, go out to this beautifully mysterious world we call home for now and just be good to one another. Thank you so much for watching, sharing, liking, and supporting. We will see you next time.